Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestha Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyacharne Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchkalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyavacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So, devotees, last night we began the subsection from verse 16 to verse 18. We began that. We read verse 16. The subject of the subsection is what results come from from actions and the modes that we looked at. Then what develops from them, that's verse 17. And then what destination one gets from each of them, that's verse 18. Interesting subject. So let's just get straight into it. Verse 17. From the mode of goodness. Here we got to, the idea is what develops. Well, actually, let's read both 17 and 18. Yeah, that's what we'll do. From the mode of goodness, real knowledge develops. From the mode of passion, greed develops. And from the mode of ignorance, develop foolishness, madness, and illusion. Verse 18. Those situated in the mode of goodness gradually go upward to the higher planets. Those in the mode of passion live on the earthly planets. And those in the abominable mode of ignorance go down to the hellish worlds. Okay. So all right, verse 17 again. From the mode of goodness, real knowledge develops. From the mode of passion, greed develops. And from the mode of ignorance develop foolishness, madness, and illusion. So, Srila Prabhupada explains in the beginning of the purport that if everyone takes to Krishna consciousness, then everyone will come to goodness, and of course they'll go beyond goodness too. So the way Prabhupada puts it is nice. Since the present civilization is not very congenial to the living entities, Krishna consciousness is recommended because Krishna consciousness is much more congenial. Actually, the conditions in this Kali Yuga now, they are just terrible, absolutely shocking, ghastly conditions, not congenial for human beings. Better suited for, you could say, man-animals. That's really the fact. But if people come to Krishna consciousness, then the mode of goodness will develop more. Yes. And people will understand things more clearly. Real knowledge will develop. That's what Krishna says in the verse. Real knowledge will develop more, at least, and therefore people will be able to make better decisions and live with better and happier standards of life. So Whereas in the mode of passion, well, Krishna said that greed develops. Well, that's for sure. Greed, desire, hankering, they develop. And of course, when those desires and hankerings, when that greed for more is not satisfied, particularly if one loses out in some bad way, then great anxiety, distress develops. Oh, it's so difficult. Whereas in the mode of ignorance, then what develops is people develop into animals, you could say. So Prabhupada explains that really what is needed, of course what is needed is Krishna consciousness, but in another sense, Prabhupada makes the point, because people have no education and actual knowledge, they become irresponsible. This is such an important thing, education. Nowadays, practically all young people understand you need a good education. When I was young, to leave school and just go and work was normal. And not so many people went to university. Some went, but not so many. So yeah, education makes a huge difference to one's future. One can create a better future on the basis of good education. And this applies in this case to education in Krishna consciousness. But because there isn't much, therefore the people, they don't know what will be the consequences. If you do this, if you do that, if you kill an animal, what will the consequences be? Oh, they will be bad. But they don't know. They know that if we drink liquor, we feel sort of, funny. They know if we get a job and work, we get money. These things they know. But those are just too elementary material type things. They don't know that if you don't understand the laws of karma, they just don't know, then you're going to mess up. You're going to do all sorts of wrong things, but you won't know. And ignorance is no excuse. So off you will go to the hellish planets. Yeah. So, right. So therefore, Krishna conscious education is so much required. That's why Prabhupada pushed book distribution relentlessly. At least from, I would say, about 74, 75 onwards, relentlessly pushed book distribution. Yeah. So ignorance can't help, it's hopeless. Passion won't help either, really. If people, Srila Baladev Vijayabhushan says, from rajas comes greed, a particular craving, which cannot be satisfied by indulgence in millions of sense objects. Just in that regard, there's very interesting little passion in, what is it now? It's the 8th canto, story of Lord Vamana Dev, Bali Maharaj, Lord Vamana. Bali Maharaj offered Lord Vamana whatever you want, anything. You just say, it's yours. You can have a planet. anything. Lord Vamana asked for 3 steps of land. And Bali Maharaj said, you're just a little boy. You don't know the value of things. 3 steps of land, that's ridiculous. I'll give you a planet. You want a planet? At least a country. But then, my point here is, Prahlad Maharaj famously replied, if I cannot be satisfied with 3 steps of land, then I could not be satisfied with a whole planet, or even a whole universe, but a whole something really huge. Yes, because the mode of passion means it just goes on and on and on, and there's no end to it. There's literally no end to it. Okay, yeah. And money won't help. Money won't help. So 18, those situated in the mode of passion gradually go upward to those situated in the mode of goodness gradually go upward to the higher planets. Those in the mode of passion live on the earthly planets, and those in the abominable mode of ignorance go down to the hellish worlds. Okay, so these are the destinations after death, of course. After death. Yeah, if you're in goodness, higher planets, better situation, more happiness, more enjoyment. Mode of passion, back here to planet Earth, and then it's the same old thing again. And if you die in the mode of ignorance, you go down to hell, to the hellish planets, and there you suffer too much. Right. And so in the purport, Srila Prabhupada comments that if one goes, if one is in the mode of goodness, this is the first paragraph of the purport, then you'll go up. You can even go up to Brahmaloka, the planet of Lord Brahma. It's not easy, but it can be done. And if not Brahmaloka, at least to some heavenly planet, which is much better than wherever we are now in this world, other than being with devotees. We're talking in material terms here. So you can go to Brahmaloka, and Prabhupada makes the point, we've seen already that we can hardly calculate the wondrous condition of life in Brahmaloka. Oh, the enjoyment. But if we live in goodness, we can go there. Then Srila Prabhupada, next paragraph, is dedicated to passion. Of course, it's not possible it's not possible to be in pure passion. There must be a mixture. It's not possible to be in pure goodness if you're on the material level. If you're Krishna conscious, you can be in pure goodness. So anyway, in the mode of passion, it's in the middle. Yeah. And Prabhupada says, even if a person should be purely in the mode of passion, he'll simply remain on this earth. It's hardly likely to be purely in the mode of passion. Yeah. And Prabhupada mentions how, well, he doesn't mention the name, but Ravana wanted to build a staircase to the moon because he knew it's a heavenly planet, and he just wanted to walk up to the heavenly planets And of course nowadays the scientists and people like that, they want to make machines to go to other planets. But even if they do, actually it's not easy, to put it extremely mildly, but even if they do, then what are they going to do? The consciousness is the same. According to the little machines they've sent up even to Mars, Mars does not look like a very pleasant place. And the moon. So what's the point? It's crazy. And Prabhupada even makes the point that if a person is really in the mode of passion, there's also the chance of becoming mad in the next life. Just too obsessive, driven too much to enjoyment, one may just lose it. And the mode of ignorance, of course, the word which is used, just if you want to encapsulate the mode of ignorance in one word, here the word is abominable. Just abominable. It's too much. It's just way too much. So to really be fixed in ignorance, to go deep into ignorance, for example, heavy intoxication, heavy ongoing intoxication, then one attains a situation, Prabhupada says, it's very, very risky, extremely risky. And you can go down and become some sort of hopeless animal. Hopeless. One devotee once said to Srila Prabhupada that maybe they saw a picture, or there was something of a dolphin, a type of mammal that lives in the sea, not exactly a fish. And Prabhupada was saying, not taking it very seriously. And that one devotee said, Prabhupada, I've heard that some people have taught dolphins to speak, a little something. Like, we're standing up for the dolphins. Good for the dolphins. And Prabhupada stopped and said, yes, but what have they done? What have they done? Human society, as faulty as it may be, has at least done many things. So much development has happened. But the dolphins, they're still swimming around naked in the sea. And that's it. End of story. So, it's just too bad if people who stay continuously in the mode of ignorance, heavy intoxication, and, psychological conditions, Prabhupada says, if they do that without rising to a higher mode, their future is very dark. Very dark. So, but, last paragraph, Srila Prabhupada again, don't ask me how many times Srila Prabhupada has done this, but here he does it again, that people can be elevated. People in ignorance and passion can come to goodness if they take up Krishna consciousness, and then they can go beyond goodness and go back to Godhead. But otherwise, if they don't do that, sorry, you've had it. You've just simply had it. All right, so now we come into the last section of the book. From verse 19 to verse 27, which is titled, we have titled, Transcending the Modes. Yeah. So the first subsection is verses 19 and 20. And that is not exactly titled, but described as follows. One transcends all three modes by knowing that all activities take place under the control of the modes. You transcend the modes by knowing that all activities are under their control, and by understanding Krishna's position as transcendental to the modes. You remember Bhagavad Gita chapter 4 verse 9, Janma karma chame divyam evam yoveti tatvataha. If we simply understand properly the transcendental nature of Krishna's appearance and activities, back to Godhead. So, if we understand what's going on with the modes, and what to do and what not to do, and how to progress to a higher level in regard to the modes, which we read about yesterday, I'm sure you remember. I sincerely hope you wrote those things down. Wow, that's important. So if you develop knowledge like that of how to elevate yourself, and you understand Krishna as being transcendental, then you transcend yourself. So yeah, let's read verses 19 and 20. 19. When one properly sees that in all activities no other performer is at work than these modes of nature, and he knows the Supreme Lord, who is transcendental to all these modes, he attains my spiritual nature. Verse 20. When the embodied being is able to transcend these three modes associated with the material body, he can become free from birth, death, old age, and their distresses, and enjoy nectar even in this life. Very nice. Okay, so, verse 19 again. When one properly sees that in all activities no other performer is at work than these modes of nature, and he knows the Supreme Lord who is transcendental to all these modes, he attains my spiritual nature. My spiritual nature, Lord Krishna, in the Sanskrit says madbhavam. My spiritual nature, basically. Madbhavam. Aha, okay. So, right. In just an interesting point. Through the discussion in verses 6 to 18, we have just been going through those, of course. Through that discussion, Krishna has in detail examined the workings, how it works, of what was mentioned briefly in the 13th chapter, verses 20, 21, and 22. It's interesting to see how things connect up, how things tie in with other things in Bhagavad Gita. Let me just read chapter 13, verses 20 and 22. And then if you can think back And remember what we've been discussing in verses 6 to 18 about the modes, how they compete with each other, and what are the different characteristics, what develops, what are the results, destinations, all these things. Bear that in mind. Then you'll see that Krishna, in those verses 6 to 18 in this chapter 14, he has elaborated on what he said in chapter 13, verses 20 to 22, as follows. Material nature and the living entities should be understood to be beginningless. Their transformations and the modes of matter are products of material nature. That was 2021. Nature is said to be the cause of all material causes and effects, whereas the living entity is the cause of the various sufferings and enjoyments in this world, through trying to enjoy all the facilities provided by matter. 22. The living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus he meets with good and evil among various species. Okay, so just remember 6 to 18, a couple of things, few things we mentioned. The results of being in the different modes, the destinations of dying in the different modes, characteristics of the different, of people in the different modes. And this verse is saying, anyway, yeah, it's like that. It's like that. So now, Srila Prabhupada, let's have a look at this verse. Prabhupada begins the purport by explaining how that we can transcend all the activities of the modes of nature simply by understanding them properly. But how are you going to do that? Prabhupada says, by learning from the proper souls. The real spiritual master is Krishna. And he is imparting this spiritual knowledge to Arjuna. Similarly, it is from those who are fully in Krishna consciousness that one has to learn this science of activities in terms of the modes of nature. Yeah, so one needs a spiritual master. And if one has a spiritual master, then one can understand one's position on the material level. What are the differences between that and the spiritual level, and how to then transfer oneself from the material level to the spiritual level. Just as an example, those 10 things we read last night. If you change the place where you live, the type of work you do, the literature you read, the mantras you chant, and so on and so on and so on, then you can change your position in the modes. It can be done, particularly when it's reinforced by chanting Hare Krishna. In fact, if you simply chant Hare Krishna, then you may be able to change your position, and gradually, as you become more knowledgeable and apply it, go back to Godhead. So otherwise, the problem is, and Prabhupada makes this point here, the problem is that the living entity, Prabhupada says it's right in the middle of the purport, that the living entity is helpless, being in the grip of the modes. Can't see his real position. But when he sees his real position through Krishna consciousness, then he can transcend. then he can become Krishna conscious. Yeah. So yeah, that's the basic point. The basic point is we need education in Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, our situation is helpless and hopeless. I think there was a song in my youth, helplessly hopeless, hopelessly helpless, if I remember correctly. Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Anyway, Haribol. The material world is like that. Otherwise you're helpless. Without the help of spiritual authority, helpless, hopeless. That's all. That's all. Yeah. Because without the help of spiritual authority, you will not understand your position sufficiently and what to do sufficiently in order to become elevated, and sooner or later you'll just fall down. So Srila Baladev Vijayabhushan says that Krishna says, the pure jiva filled with knowledge and bliss is not the agent of actions filled with sorrow, such as fighting and sacrifice. When he sees that he's endowed with body and senses made of the gunas, and thus understands that the doership of those actions is fixed in the gunas, not in the pure soul, because the motive for action is in the gunas, then he attains freedom from samsara, or he attains my supreme bhakti, madbhavam. I have said this before, Krishna says, and we have said this. Prabhupada has said this on numerous occasions. Yeah. And Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, for one who is able to see things as they are, the influence of material nature gradually ceases. It's in the purport here, it's the last sentence in the purport. And then verse 20, offering spiritual life. So like this is the cause, Krishna consciousness, the chanting. Even one is not in goodness, even one is in the darkest part of the quality of ignorance, still he can be immediately elevated to the spiritual platform, which is recommended by Krishna, that you have come to the platform above the modes of goodness. So this Krishna consciousness movement is directly offering the spiritual platform, which is above the mode of goodness. And, many of us we are living proof that one can be in the darkest part of ignorance, but still become Krishna conscious. Yeah. By association with Prabhupada and those who are seriously following Prabhupada. Okay, so on to 20. When the embodied soul, when the embodied being is able to transcend these three modes associated with the material body, he can become free from birth, death, old age and their distresses, and can enjoy nectar even in this life. Yes. So become Krishna conscious, stay fixed in spiritual understanding and spiritual activity, you'll go back to Godhead. Srila Baladev Vijayabhushan makes an interesting comment. You may have to listen carefully, it's a little subtle. So in the previous verse, the Lord said, you will attain madbhavam. Madbhavam, which madbhavam is my abode, my nature, my spiritual nature. Yeah. So the Lord clarifies the meaning. This is Baladev Vijabhushan. The Lord clarifies the meaning of his previous statement about attaining madbhavam. Although the Atma is situated in the body, by the power of distinguishing jiva from the gunas, he overcomes the three modes which give rise to the body, and freed from birth, death, old age, and suffering, experiences the soul. Thus, madbhavam of the previous verse can mean beyond samsara, in the sense of being deathless, or becoming qualified for my pure bhakti. Madbhavam can mean beyond samsara, in the sense of being deathless, or becoming qualified for my pure bhakti. Now, the next subsection is verse 21 to 25. And here Arjuna inquires about the symptoms of a person who's transcended the modes, and how a person can do that, how one can transcend. Krishna answers that one who has transcended, when he or she looks around, they see how the modes are working, and understanding their spiritual nature, they remain fixed spiritually, despite the presence sometimes of attachment, illusion, illumination, happiness, distress, praise, infamy, friends or enemies. So this is from verse 21 to 25. Let's read the verses. Arjuna, 21, Arjuna inquired, O my dear Lord, by which symptoms is one known who is transcendental to these three modes? What is his behavior? And how does he transcend the modes of nature? Yeah. That's 21. And then 22 to 25, Prabhupada has grouped them together. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O son of Pandu, he who does not hate illumination, attachment and delusion when they're present, or long for them when they disappear, who is unwavering and undisturbed through all these reactions of the material qualities, remaining neutral and transcendental, knowing that the modes alone are active, one who is situated in the self and regards alike happiness and distress, who looks upon a lump of earth, a stone, and a piece of gold with an equal eye, who is equal toward the desirable and the undesirable, who is steady, situated equally well in praise and blame, honor and dishonor, who treats alike both friend and enemy, and who has renounced all material activities. Such a person is said to have transcended the modes of nature. Through Krishna consciousness, of course, but these are just the symptoms, the characteristics. Yeah. So 21 again. Arjuna inquired, O my dear Lord, by which symptoms is one known who is transcendental to these three modes? What is his behavior? And how does he transcend the modes of nature? So, yeah, Prabhupada mentions here in the beginning of the purport, in this verse, Arjuna's questions are very appropriate. Yeah. In other words, these are crucial points. 3 questions. What are the symptoms of a transcendental person? What is the person's behavior? And how did he become? Or how does any person become transcendental to the modes? And, of course, we can note the similarity. Who can remember? Anyone here who can remember another place in Bhagavad Gita where, really similar questions were asked? I mean, really similar. Extremely similar. It was in the later part, particularly verse 54 of chapter 2. Oh yes, there's so much description there. How does he sit? How does he walk? All these things like this. And extensive answers covering quite a number of verses. So again, this is being repeated here. Let me just read that chapter 2, verse 54 again. Arjuna said, "O Krishna, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak? What's his language? How does he sit? How does he walk?" So it's very similar, except now he's talking in relation to the modes. At that point, the fact that a person may sit or walk or talk or do so many other things because he or she is under the influence of a particular arrangement of the modes of nature, that point had not come up yet. No mention. It's more just in the general sense. If someone does like this, what is his behavior? Yeah, so there's a little difference in that. Now Arjuna's asking in terms of the modes. So it's like a little higher perspective on the same subject. And verses 22 to 25, I guess I'll read them again. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "O son of Pandu, he who does not hate illumination, attachment, and delusion when they're present, or long for them when they disappear." What does that mean? It means that sometimes some attachment may possibly arise, but we don't react. We don't hate it. And we don't like it. We just know it's there. That's all. We're not affected by it. There's a famous story Prabhupada told of 2 brahmacharis who were walking somewhere, and they came to a place they had to cross some sort of stream or river type of thing. And there was one young woman there, and she asked them, could one of you please carry me across here, because, it's very difficult for me. And one of the brahmacharis didn't say anything, but just thought, what? Carry a woman? Come on. But the other brahmachari said, sure, no problem, and just picked her up And they crossed the river, and he put her down, and then everyone, the two brahmacharis went their way, she went her way. And the one who had refused, in his mind, he's just fuming. How could he do this? What does he think he's doing? It's Maya. He's in Maya, carrying a woman. Oh, etc., etc. But he didn't say anything for a while. And then after maybe half an hour or so, it just got too much, and he turned around and he said, listen, I got to get this off my chest. Why did you do that? Why did you carry that woman? And the brahmachari who had carried her famously said, I just carried her for a minute across the river. You've been carrying her in your mind for the last half hour or whatever it's been. Yeah. So that's the principle being mentioned here. The principle is one that, these things come and go. It's like physical sickness. It comes and goes. And it's not, in a sense at least, it's not necessarily your fault if you get physically sick. These things happen. So similarly with the subtle body. The subtle body is exposed to different influences, and it becomes moved by these things sometimes. But we must not be attached to them. As Krishna said earlier, just let them flow through and flow away, like the water of a river just flows away. So, okay, let's have a look at the purport here. And the answers, well, there were, how many were there? 4 questions. What are the symptoms of one who's transcendental? 3 questions, is it? Okay, 3. What are the symptoms of a person who's transcended? What's his behavior? How does a person become transcendental? And the answers are, well, at least these 4 verses, 22, 23, 24, 25, they are answering the first 2 questions. What are the symptoms and what is the behavior of a transcendental person? And in a nutshell, just in a nutshell, the answers to those 2 questions, symptoms and behavior, the answers are: 1, no envy, no hankering. 2, even though embodied, must remain neutral. 3, should engage in devotional service, and this will help one forget about one's bodily identification. And 4, in order to become aloof, you must not want to enjoy the body or to get rid of it. You must not love it or hate it. You just happen to have your body, use it in Krishna's service without loving it or hating it. This is all from the first paragraph. And Prabhupada concludes that paragraph by saying, thus transcendentally situated, the devotee becomes automatically free. He need not try to become free from the influence of the modes. Then the second paragraph is dealing with the behavior and the dealings. What we just mentioned, those 4, those are more like symptoms. Now here, it's behaviors, dealings like that. And there's a list of 6. I mean, they just be extracted from these verses. Not affected by honor or dishonor, accepts things favorable for Krishna consciousness, whether stones or gold, takes everyone as a dear friend, doesn't hate enemies, equally disposed to all, sees everyone on the same level. Social or political matters don't affect him because he knows they're temporary. Doesn't try for anything for himself, attempts anything for Krishna. And Prabhupada concludes the purport, by such behavior, one becomes actually transcendentally situated. All right, so now the last subsection, verses 26 and 27. 26, it's a famous verse. It is just a famous verse. One who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. So Prabhupada points out that this verse is the answer to Arjuna's 3rd question. How to attain? How do you come to that transcendental stage, transcendental platform? Well, as the verse says, as Krishna says, you've got to engage wholeheartedly in devotional service, not getting distracted, just absorbed like that, fully focused, not on and off, but just fully on in Krishna consciousness. Then immediately you transcend the modes. Yes, so Prabhupada says, one shouldn't be disturbed by the activities of the modes. Instead of putting your consciousness into such activities, one may transfer his consciousness to Krishna activities. So that's what we must do. Transfer our consciousness and our activities to Krishna activities. And then Prabhupada further down makes the point, if one engages oneself in devotional service with unfailing determination, then even though the modes are hard to overcome, one will easily overcome them. One who surrenders to Krishna immediately surmounts the influence of the modes of nature. It reminds us of which verse? 7:14. Daiviyesha gunamayi mama maya dharachya mama eviye prapajante mayametam tarantite. This divine energy of mind consisting of the 3 modes of material nature is difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. Yeah. So that's nice. So Prabhupada, he describes Krishna consciousness, Bhakti Yoga, in very nice terms. Let's see what he says. It is, where is it now? Oops. Bhakti Yoga, where? Oh yeah. Bhakti Yoga, we are now, where are we? We are about 6 or 7 or 8 sentences up from the bottom of the purport. Bhakti Yoga means the Lord is there, the devotee is there, and the activity of exchange of love between the Lord and the devotee is there. So the point is that when we're wholeheartedly engaged in devotional service, we're on the transcendental platform. But when we let some material influence come in the form of any of the modes, then our devotional service will become contaminated, and our experience will not be transcendental like it was before. Or it depends, but certainly not as transcendental. And finally, verse 27, and I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal, and is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness. In other words, this is just following on from verse 26, which was talking about engaging fully in devotional service, and in that way transcending, coming to the level of Brahman. So Krishna is now explaining what is the Brahman, at least the impersonal Brahman. The point is there. It's just a very simple point that Lord Krishna is making it very clear that he is beyond even Brahman, that transcendental level, which is beyond. Brahman is beyond the modes, but Krishna is beyond Brahman. He's in a special transcendental position. So, let's see here. Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, let's just read part of the purport. The living entity, although Brahman by nature, has the desire to lord it over the material world, and due to this he falls down. In his constitutional position, a living entity is above the three modes of material nature, but association with material nature entangles him in the different modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. Due to the association of these three modes, his desire to dominate the material world is there. By engagement in devotional service and full Krishna consciousness, he's immediately situated in the transcendental position, and his unlawful desire to control material nature is removed. Therefore, the process of devotional service, beginning with hearing, chanting, remembering the prescribed 9 methods for realizing devotional service, should be practiced in the association of devotees, including, Prabhupada says, chant always Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. All right, now, finally, devotees, I'm sorry. Well, I'm not really sorry, but we have a special question for those of you doing Bhakti Shastri. It's connected with this verse 27 we just read. Except we quote from Srila Prabhupada's purport, is it? No, it's actually Narada Muni speaking to Maharaj Yudhisthira, Prabhupada's translation, Srimad Bhagavatam 7:10:49. 7:10:49. In which Narada Muni says to Maharaj Yudhisthira, the impersonal Brahman is Krishna himself, because Krishna is the source of the impersonal Brahman. He is the origin of the transcendental bliss sought by great saintly persons. Yet he, the Supreme Person, is your most dear friend and constant well-wisher, and is intimately related to you as the son of your maternal uncle. Indeed, he is always like your body and soul. He is worshipable, yet he acts as your servant, and sometimes as your spiritual master. So the question is this. A verse from Srimad Bhagavatam was mentioned in class pertaining to the impersonal Brahman. Who spoke the verse? And who was it spoken to? Who spoke the verse? Huh? Narada to Yudhisthira. Thank you. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to the 14th chapter of Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of the three modes of material nature. All right. Very good. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.